Welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, that faithful and oh so discreet slave, that they are living in a modern day spiritual paradise. What a claim. I'm your host here, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness in the 70s and 80s. As I like to do each week, a little bit of a warning, trigger warning. We try to have some fun here. We try to heal. We try to be educational. Lots of sarcasm, humor, and more. If that offends you, take the next off-ramp. But we are not trying to offend anyone, trying to be helpful. We'll leave it at that. Well, here we are. What do we do with this? What do we do with this? The July 2026 JW broadcast has been released, and it is something to behold. I'm going to say it now. After watching this entire broadcast, available on the only website powered by Holy Spirit, I came away thinking that this was on par with, I don't know, let's just say the trumpet blasts in the book of Revelation in the Bible. That once revered Revelation climax book released in the late 80s told us we're all tied to Jehovah's Witnesses. All those trumpet blasts John wrote about, yeah, it was all about the organization, proclamations, conventions, and other stuff. You remember, while all other Bible readers wonder if John was just sitting on Patmos, passing his days by getting into some magic mushrooms, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses claim that the 7 trumpet blasts ranged, from 1922 Cedar Point, Ohio Convention to 1925 Indianapolis, Indiana Convention, all the way down to the 1928 Detroit, Michigan Convention. Wow, isn't that something? Yeah, those wild angels in the Bible's most controversial book were deeply concerned, while giving the revelation to John, about places like Ohio, Michigan, and even California and Los Angeles. Just blowing those trumpets while John jotted it all down in the Bible for a mostly Caucasian religion founded in the United States of America. Interestingly, that's where the conventions were that were part of the 7 trumpet blasts. It was all very, very mysterious. So we're all grateful for the governing body and that mothballed book, the Revelation Climax book. And the memories of conducting that, including me laughing at times with my group. One can only wonder what they will say 100 years from now about the July 2026 JW broadcast. Because I'm here to tell you, and I'm prone to hyperbole, this is one for the ages. I came away from this with one singular thought. Something big is coming. Something really big. Bank it. This one is fun. And might I add, it's a little chilling. I'm starting to put 2 and 2 together that when they're setting up Jehovah's Witnesses for something big and greasing the skids, they like to roll out this month's host, Brother Robert Luccioni, helper to the publishing committee. He has a certain gravitas about him. And I personally think he's one of their better speakers, if I'm being honest. But maybe it's the Italian in me. I'm biased. Dude has the best looking hair and beard of the bunch. And to be honest, he looks like he hits the gym. I can respect that. As a guy probably around his age who hits the gym 5 days a week myself, respect to future Paradise Prince Robert Luccioni. So the second I saw that he was the host, I immediately knew we were in for something a little different this month. And I'm not wrong. I'll let you guess where this July 2026 broadcast is going by sharing his opening remarks, where he says this, quote, "We all want to make good decisions and look to the future with confidence. To do this, we need good direction. To do this month, we will talk about where to find and how to follow good direction." End quote. He gives a preview of the whole episode, and it begins with that creepy jingle that they have for JW Broadcasting. But the mood is set. We need to make good decisions, people. And according to the opening remarks, we need someone to show us how to make good decisions. Do you want to take a guess who that someone might be? I'm only going to discuss what I thought were the major points of this month's broadcast, skipping all the experiences, all the music, all the other filler, because as always, what stands out in this episode is the fact that the governing body has a message to deliver, and deliver it with the opening talk they do. Robert Luccioni kicks off a litany of threats by saying that the theme for this broadcast is based on their Joshua chapter 3 and verse 4 of the New World Translation, and sets it all up by saying that Israel, here we are again, Israel was about to enter the Promised Land after waiting for some 40 years. Incidentally, this is something archaeologists openly claim probably never happened, folks. See past episodes if interested, or dig into the Exodus if you'd like and you want to know more. But despite proof that this very likely never happened, it's a fairy tale, the governing body is going to lean into it anyway to make a point. Kind of the way we lean into Bigfoot legends or the Loch Ness Monster. He says the next stage of life for Israel would not be easy going into the Promised Land, and it would require faith and courage to enjoy the blessings of the Promised Land. He then asks, quote, "How would they know how to proceed? Jehovah guides his people at this critical moment." End quote. And I laughed. I laughed. Really, they don't know what to do? They don't know what to do with themselves. These are the same group of people. You know, the Israelites. We like to lean on the Israelites a lot in this organization. These were the same people that escaped the most powerful government and kingdom on earth in Egypt. The same people who watched water turn to blood. They even saw a sea open up and walked right through it. They wandered around eating magical food called manna off the ground. They dodged plagues of snakes, building serpent idols and calf idols. They drank water out of a rock. They watched the earth open and swallow apostates. Remember Korah? That was a good drama. They even saw Miriam, Moses' sister, get covered in leprosy for calling out her brother Moses for marrying an unbeliever. Incidentally, something that gets you vilified as a Jehovah's Witness in 2026. On and on it goes with the Israelites. But carry on, Robert. Tell us how all of this applies to Jehovah's Witnesses in 2026, and how the Israelites still needed directions on how to enter the first Airbnb on record. You know, the Promised Land. He reads Joshua 3:4, which states, quote, "After 3 days, the officers passed throughout the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah your God being carried by the Levitical priests, you should depart from your place and follow it. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits from it. Do not come any nearer to it, so that you may know which is the way to go, for you have not traveled on this way before." End quote. Joshua 3:4, New World Translation. And I again began to laugh. You see, I can't keep up with Jehovah. How about you? Despite being the Almighty, he definitely seemed to be kind of challenged when it comes to directions or finding his way around, including his lost car keys. You might remember that he sent his own angel of death in the Bible to slaughter little Egyptian babies. He was into that. He was into that stuff because he had a point to prove after all. And well, he wasn't even sure where to find the little Egyptian babies versus the little Israelite babies. So he had his Israelite people slaughter lambs and put blood on the doorways, otherwise known as the Passover, so that Jehovah himself, the Almighty, who sees everything, and his angel of death didn't mistakenly slaughter the Israelite babies too. Just the Egyptian babies got it. He just got kind of confused and stuff. So he needed these same Israelites to give him a hand or risk the angel of death killing their babies right alongside Pharaoh's babies. But now, in the July 2026 broadcast, according to Robert Luccioni and his 11 overlords, this same Jehovah is going to give the Israelites directions into the promised land. Because maybe Jehovah suddenly found his way. He fixed his GPS finally, or he got better angel guides. I don't know. But please, as this talk continues, remember to check your brain at the door. Slip it into the mason jar or the cubbyhole. As well as their book, the Bible, we're now going to hear about how the same God suddenly got good at finding his way around. You know, around the planet that he actually made. So again, if these same Israelites can just help a God out by slapping some blood on the doorpost so he doesn't accidentally kill their babies too, that would be really cool. And now, carry on, Robert Luccioni. And incidentally, just a side point, for the frustrated ladies out there, a reminder that we were created in God's image. So when you get frustrated with us guys, your husband or your boyfriend for getting lost, not reading the map, or stubbornly going the wrong direction, just remember, us guys are just like Jehovah. We were made in his image. Sometimes we can't locate which babies to kill. Okay. Carry on, Robert. I can't imagine where this broadcast is going. This is the theme. We need someone to tell us what to do with everything. So Luccioni continues with this, quote, "The nation of Israel had difficulties following direction. They often focused negatively on the men who were leading them, or let pride and the desire for independence influence their decisions." End quote. And ladies and gentlemen, please now buckle your seatbelts, keep your hands and arms inside the moving vehicle, because this entire broadcast and this talk, which is what I'm honing in on, is about to get very culty. It's about to get real culty. I don't need to say another word for most Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-J-dubs to know where this talk is going. And they waste no time in getting into their message. A message that is demonstratively increasing with each broadcast, each convention, and each publication. But more importantly, and I can only share my opinion, that's what I do here, a message that is clear-cut proof that the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses is a cult. Ignore this at your own peril. I know it's uncomfortable depending on where you are in your journey. But between the morning worship talk by Jonathan Smith a few weeks ago in June and now the July 2026 J-Dub broadcast with Robert Luccioni, it is crystal clear what is on the minds of the governing body. They are losing control. And they're doing everything in their power to reinforce that they alone have the power of life and death for every Jehovah's Witness. That a person's strict obedience to 11 flesh and blood men in New York isn't an option. It is a requirement, or you too will face your own death at Armageddon, an event that they will take part in. You will note that the writing committee, via Brother Luccioni, has already, in this talk, started to shame Jehovah's Witnesses into complicity by comparing Jehovah's old-time people, the Israelites, to such comments as, how did he say it here? Quote, negativity, pride, and desire for independence, end quote. So Rob next says, quote, now, why is this relevant today? End quote. Well, allow me to help you, Robert. It isn't. It isn't relevant to 2026 whatsoever. Neither are talking donkeys, talking snakes, and a whole bunch of other things. But like many religions, you're relying on a book written by men to establish your power and your relevancy. And it doesn't at all. It's no more relevant in 2026 than animal sacrifices are. You remember, your CEO, Jesus Christ himself, said that all of this nonsense was done away with when he arrived. But hey, carry on. You have a point to make, and you've been put up to it by the governing body. So he next says, quote, we too are at a pivotal point in human history. All indications suggest that we are deep in the last days and could soon see the beginning of the Great Tribulation leading to Armageddon. Following direction will be vital. End quote. And a quick side note, never take the words of us terrible apostates. Please go watch this broadcast for yourself. I invite you to. I implore you to. Because as he uses the term following direction at this point, he reaches over and touches the Bible with his hand. He even looks at it, following direction, and touches the Bible. Fascinating stuff. A deeply disturbing gesture that you would maybe not notice as he subconsciously sets the stage for Jehovah's Witnesses that anything he says or the guys that he answers to, any direction that they give comes from the Bible as he touches it and Jehovah. Even as seconds later, in fact, the bulk of this entire talk is him admitting that the direction does not come from Jehovah. It comes from the governing body, the men he works for. But this cult-like gesture to suggest it comes from heaven is always present in this religion. Please pay attention to what they're doing to you here. Zero direction to Jehovah's Witnesses comes from the Bible. For reasons too many to mention today, it's a subject unto itself. But the subliminal suggestion is that it all comes from Jehovah as he touches his Bible on camera. He continues by saying this, quote, how will we know the way to go? Well, just as in Joshua's day, wait a minute, Joshua, wait a minute. Well, just as in Joshua's day, it's imperative to identify how Jehovah is leading his people and then following. With that in mind, we will consider 3 points in this discussion, end quote. Not much of a discussion, actually. You're just talking at us, kind of like this podcast. But what follows is concrete evidence as to what the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses really is. The messaging has been injected with steroids recently, even though it's not new messaging. Jehovah's Witnesses must comply and obey anything the governing body tells them to do. It has always been this way, people. However, they seem to be entering new territory as they once again overemphasize obedience to these men in any circumstance. Incidentally, with just a little effort and looking into their own library, you'll see that they did this in 1919. Interesting date. They did it again in 1925, and they even did it in 1975. And every single decade in between and since. How about just a few examples of this obey us or die message that the governing body has given witnesses through the years? Here's three from the Watchtower of 1959. Wow, that's a while ago. October 1st, page 583, where they said, quote, to act consistently with our baptism for life and into the greater Noah, we must submit to and cooperate with that slave and its legal instrument, the Watchtower Society, end quote. Interesting wording. Submit to the slave and a legal instrument. Huh. How about another? From Organized to Do Jehovah's Will, just from 2005, page 18, where they said, quote, there are many reasons to have complete trust in the slave class. First and foremost, Jesus has appointed them over all his precious belongings. This is a clear indication that he has complete trust in them, end quote. Is it now? I got questions. But one more from the Watchtower of November 2022 on page 25, quote, and when Jehovah's organization makes changes that affect you personally, wholeheartedly accept them and obey the direction, end quote. Please note, the implication is that Jehovah's Witnesses would be and will be totally lost without the governing body. Unable to navigate life or anything life throws at us, and even worse, it's going to guarantee your death at Armageddon. It's all a very encouraging message. Let's now begin with Brother Luccioni's list of 3 points. I can't wait. This is what he says first, quote, point 1. How do we identify the way to go? 2, how do we stay on the way? And 3, how do we keep up? End quote. The governing body has always employed long lists and bullet points to establish their messages. We all recognize this, see those symposiums at the conventions. They encourage this little connect the dots approach to thinking. He then begins with the first point, which is identifying the way to go. And oh boy, point 1 is this, quote, well, during their time in the wilderness under Moses and Aaron, the nation of Israel had clear manifestation of Jehovah's direction. We remember with the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, end quote. Oh yeah, we remember this stuff. Miracles and stuff. Physical manifestations, things human beings could actually see and touch. Extraordinary events that not a single Jehovah's Witness has ever seen, since 1919 in this organization when it was founded. We've never seen anything like this, ever, with the governing body. I love this stuff. Again, Jehovah himself needed their help to bloody up some doorways so he didn't bloody up their babies. But now Jehovah suddenly has pillars of clouds and pillars of fire to give direction to the Israelites. And we haven't seen anything like this in the modern day, like ever inside the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. We have a problem early. And so Brother Luccioni does the old bait and switch by next saying this, quote, however, Jehovah now changed the way that he would provide direction. There it is. He required faith on the part of the nation that Joshua was now the one Jehovah was using. End quote. Wait a minute. Time out, Robbie. Wait a second. I'm sorry, a couple of questions with your wild assertion as we shifted from pillars of cloud and fire that everyone could see to just requiring you to trust me, bro. It's a faith thing. I don't know. How about this? Why exactly did Jehovah move away from using pillars of fire and stuff? You see, it's pretty convincing. That somebody special's actually directing them. It's like, oh, this is a superpower. Look at the pillar of fire. So why did he stop doing that? And well, this one's really awkward, but how about my second question? And listen, you just lied on camera. Yeah, it didn't take much for me to connect the dots here. You see, your guy Joshua that you're propping up has still, I don't know, he was still pulling out these big natural phenomena tricks when later on in the Promised Land, he made the actual sun stand still. So Jehovah guided him in with pillars, but then he stopped doing that. It was just more of a trust me bro situation after that. And then Joshua went and did this. He made the sun stand still. Something that, by the way, Jehovah's Witnesses have never seen happen is from 1919 on when you became the organization on Earth. Mostly because it's actually impossible and stuff, and it would actually damage the planet Earth and people would die and stuff because the Earth, the sun, and rotate. Okay. But you just said in this talk into the camera that Jehovah somehow between pillars of fire and smoke and Joshua, he just changed. And people just have to have faith that Joshua was leading them. But Joshua was still pulling those old magic tricks out when he's kept the sun in the sky. Did you just forget this, Robert? Did you just forget? Or are you lying? You see, I learned it in the Bible Stories book in the 1970s. You remember the story. Joshua making the sun stand still. So maybe Robert Luccioni and the governing body just forgot when they were writing this talk. He says, quote, Joshua was ensuring that people really knew it was Jehovah still leading them, end quote. Well, yeah, it wasn't tough for the Israelites. You see, Rob, when you can march around cities with trumpets and the walls fall down, when you can make the sun stay in the sky and stand still, when you can part the Jordan River at one point, and when you can even call down hailstones on the Gibeonites in the Promised Land, the Israelites were actually seeing this stuff with Joshua. They were like, well, look at that, everybody. There's Jehovah. Look at the physical proofs that some superhuman power is leading us, and Joshua's just his mouthpiece. Yeah. Robert, knowing that we all have Bibles in our hands, tries to get the audience to skip from pillars of fire and smoke into just trust me, bro, Joshua's the leader. It just takes faith. Meanwhile, the Bible tells us that the Israelites could have seen any number of physical manifestations leading them around in this fairy tale, in the biblical accounts in the book of Joshua. Because it was Joshua that once they were in the Promised Land, blew some instruments and the walls of Jericho came down. He parted the Jordan River. He called down hailstones and made the sun stand still in the sky. But Rob seems to forget this. And he's kind of hoping that the rest of us forget it too. He's kind of hoping, and just goes with his point that it was obvious this man, Joshua, it just takes faith after all, was actually leading them by means of Jehovah. And if you think I'm reaching here, check out his next comment, where he says, quote, who is Jehovah using today? Jesus gives us the answer, end quote. So, Who wants to play spiritual Jeopardy with me? Do, 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 do. I'll take, what did Jesus say at Matthew chapter 24 for 500, Rob? Yeah, he doesn't disappoint, folks. He immediately takes the audience to that faithful and discreet slave parable again. You know, the parable that this organization has somehow convinced 8 million people to believe is actually a prophecy because it's convenient and stuff. But prepare to get a chill up your spine. If you know, you know. He says, quote, "But the faithful and discreet slave, who are they?" The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses makes up this group today. They provide the spiritual food, direction, and practical help for Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. Now we know that. We've considered this scripture many times. End quote. And immediately I felt terrible for Moses, the fictional character that said, "I'm pulling the water out of this rock," and Jehovah killed him, but not before trolling him with a view of the promised land. But the governing body can do it. Robert Luccioni just said it is the governing body that provides, and I quote from the video, "the spiritual food, direction, and help for Jehovah's Witnesses around the world." And we know that. Do we, Rob? I got to tell you, I've met some of the governing body, and I have yet to see them produce a pillar of cloud or fire, or make the sun stand still, or even part a sea. So, are you just saying we know that sort of like you would just say, "Trust me, bro"? I mean, I'm not connecting dots difficulty here. Let's review. Let's review this talk to this point, seconds into it. We got Joshua. We got the admission that there was visual, physical miracles for the Israelites to know Jehovah was behind everything. And then he gives us a parable from Jesus. A parable, not a prophecy. And boom, Jehovah's Witnesses, you're supposed to now believe that this is all pointing to the governing body in 2026. They are the modern day Joshua. Why exactly? And I encourage you to sit back, take a deep breath, stop listening to the podcast if you need to, and ask yourself, wait a minute, he gave us these three things, but I'm not connecting the dots here. Can you provide more proof that I should follow the governing body just like I would follow a pillar of fire in the sky? Well, he gives it his best shot by pointing at, wait a minute. He points at further proof. He wants to really land that the governing body are the faithful slave. And he uses as proof a book that the very governing body wrote about themselves. Isn't that interesting? He then asked the audience this, quote, "But have we thought deeply regarding why we believe that?" End quote. I can tell you many of us have, and we don't. But there it is, the cult-like assumptive stuff that these men use. You see, why would you even have to give this talk if you really believed that everyone watching the broadcast actually already believed the governing body was working for Jehovah? What's the point of telling people what they already believe in this talk? They already believe the governing body's the faithful slave, right, Brother Luccioni? So why are you giving this talk? The wise guidance of Jehovah's Witnesses on camera to their faces immortalized on video. I'm going to go out on a limb here But I think there are many, many Jehovah's Witnesses in 2026 that just might be questioning whether they do believe the governing body works for Jehovah, and that might just be the reason for this talk. And could it be that the 11 would-be king priests are kind of pooping their pants a little bit these days, knowing that their control isn't quite working like it used to? Why are they giving this talk to people that already believe Jehovah uses them? But carry on, Brother Luccioni, by pointing to a book the governing body wrote about themselves to prove why Jehovah's Witnesses should believe these guys are even better than Joshua. He says this, quote, "The Enjoy Life Forever book includes lesson 54, the role of the faithful and discreet slave. In that lesson, it asks our Bible students," end quote for a moment. Yes, folks, seriously. He's quoting their book and also claiming they're studying the Bible as he quotes a book that isn't the Bible. Back to the quote, "What proves to you that Jesus is leading the governing body? And do you believe the governing body is the faithful and discreet slave? These are serious questions. How would you answer?" End quote. Raise those red flags. He then goes on to tell baptized Jehovah's Witnesses to restudy the Bible. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He tells Jehovah's Witnesses on camera, go see, to restudy this book section during family worship night. Raise the red flags. What convinces you the governing body is the faithful and discreet slave? These are serious questions. That's what he said. Go read our book to make sure you believe it. And there is no more proof needed that Jehovah's Witnesses are in a cult. Why would they need to reconsider this after those people watching the video have already dedicated their lives to this organization and answered this question about the faithful slave and the governing body as one of two questions at their baptism? Could it be that some of them, oh no, are doubting who the governing body are? Could it be? Are they having second thoughts? Why do baptized, dedicated people who yelled yes at the assembly before getting in a swimming pool need to restudy who the faithful slave is? Please let it sink in. Do you realize what we are witnessing in this broadcast? I mean, am I the only one that doesn't remember Joshua? You remember, Jehovah was using him too, running around trying to reconvince anyone in the camp of Israel that he was the leader taking them into the promised land. He was running around, hey guys, I just want to convince you again. But here are the 11 king priests doing it in July of 2026. I mean, to emphasize my observations on this entire broadcast, you might remember that time Jesus Christ had to tell his apostles and the crowds over and over and over and over and over again to obey him. He had to keep convincing them. Oh, wait. When he did that, and I've got my Bible right here. It's right here in print. Oh, no. How did Jesus do this? Oh, that's right. I'm opening the Bible, and it tells me that Jesus did this with physical manifestations. He resurrected dead people. He walked on water. He healed the sick of diseases. He made wine. He exorcised demons and so many other physical proofs a human being could see. But when it comes to his guys here on earth in the last days that never end, Jesus just wants us all to live under the banner that says, hey, we're the governing body. Trust me, bro. It's all about faith. After reminding Jehovah's Witnesses to reconvince themselves of who the governing body is by studying a book they wrote, the talk continues with this comment, quote, now why is that important? Well, think about it. If the nation of Israel was going to follow men carrying the Ark of the Covenant into a river at flood stage, they needed to have complete confidence that Jehovah was guiding these men. End quote. Now, please, if you walk away and get nothing, pay very close attention to what Brother Robert Luccioni says and does next when he says, quote, well, likewise, if we are going to follow the governing body as we move into difficult days ahead, we need to have complete confidence that Jehovah is the one taking the lead by means of his Son, Jesus Christ. So what is the answer to our first question? How do we identify the way to go? Similar to the faithful Israelites, we follow the ones Jehovah is using to lead us. End quote. Folks, were you paying attention? And I mean really paying attention. Robert Luccioni in this talk proved absolutely nothing about the leadership of the governing body. It's like when you were a kid and you didn't want to eat your peas or green beans, hated them. He just kind of took the vegetables and he spread it out all over his plate to make it look like he ate his green beans. But if you were paying attention, this man got on camera and nothing changed and nothing was proven as to the authority of the governing body. Jehovah's Witnesses are required to follow these 11 men with zero physical proof that the invisible guys in heaven, Jehovah and Jesus, are even using them. Just some harebrained comparison to the Israelites who were led around by wide open seas, pillars of fire and stuff, and somehow, in between sentences, this is all supposed to compare to Jehovah's Witnesses following the governing body who can't prove a damn thing about their authority. Nothing. Trust me, bro. They can keep firing up the cameras and trying to word salad people into obedience, but smart people who are listening and paying attention recognize that this guy said a whole bunch of nothing. Nothing. What is all this talk about confidence in their leadership? What have these men and the ones who served on this little committee ever done to prove that Jehovah himself was leading them? The leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses has a 100% failure rate on everything they have ever said. But according to Luccioni, and for the people not paying attention, glazed over, drooling on themselves, they're just like Joshua and stuff. Are they? Are they now? Jehovah's Witnesses, please pay attention. Watch this broadcast, I implore you. I don't care. What did this man just prove to you about the governing body? What? What dots did he connect between Joshua, the promised land, Jehovah, and the governing body? Anything? Something? Let's move on to the second point in this talk, where Rob says this, quote, "How do we stay on the way? It may be easy to follow directions when we agree with the direction given. However, it's more difficult when we are asked to do something that doesn't quite fit with what we think should be done. What do we do then?" End quote. Here we go. Buckle up. Full admission that Jehovah's Witnesses in 2026 are questioning the clowns in New York. It's obvious. It's obvious. There are at least a few. He then takes the audience in this talk to the Apostle Paul as an example of how to act, and he reads Acts chapter 21, where Paul gave the elders updates on his preaching work. The guys in Jerusalem get pissed off about Paul's conversations on circumcision with the Jews. And oh yeah, listen folks, foreskin is a really big deal. It's a big deal in the Bible. It's a big deal. Somehow, some way, there is always a penis involved in things. It's how it goes. It's how it goes. Thank God Eve got the rib and not the peanut. Well, she did get the peanut. Okay, I'm going to stop. They gave the Apostle Paul instructions on foreskins and stuff, and even throws in an offhand comment about Paul using, and I quote, this is so weird, go watch it, Paul using, quote, his own funds, end quote, to do something he didn't agree with in circumcision. And why did he do this? Because he was loyal to those taking the lead. Very subtle, Rob. Very subtle with the cash comment and loyalty. Rob then says, quote, "Now what's the lesson? When we receive direction, even if it seems unnecessary or we have a different opinion, do we trust Jehovah enough to follow it? If you receive clear direction, follow it. If there is no scriptural law being disregarded, you never know if it's Jehovah who is maneuvering matters for a reason. And even if not, he will reward you for your loyalty. At times, this direction can mean our lives." End quote. My God, people. Obey the governing body even if it defies common sense. Obey them blindly. And then to have the balls to say, quote, "You never know if Jehovah is maneuvering matters," end quote. Exactly. Exactly. That is the problem, Brother Luccioni. Your little Jedi mind tricks don't work on all of us. Why would a thinking human ever obey something if they can't confirm it actually came from God? Does he even hear himself? And then to tell Jehovah's Witnesses that even if the direction is wrong, didn't you just tell us in the sentence before that it came from the perfect God Jehovah? How could the direction ever be wrong? But he says to do it anyway, and that the same God who never gets anything wrong, but then sometimes gets things wrong, will reward you loyalty for obeying the thing Jehovah got wrong. And in case you missed it, he once again threatened people with death if they don't obey the 11 men in upstate New York that not a single person can prove even work for Jehovah. Forgive me, ladies. Forgive me. But what the actual fuck are we listening to here? You are listening to a cult. But as if he hasn't already dug a hole of no return, he then points the listener to one of their dramas. What? One of their old dramas to make his point. The drama is called Commit Your Way to Jehovah. Have you noticed throughout this talk, by the way, that Jehovah and the governing body are synonymous with each other? They're the same person. They just interchange the title. Obey Jehovah, obey the governing body, obey Jehovah, obey the governing body. They're the same people, same power. But back to this drama. I got no clue. I didn't go watch it. But you remember the drama. It apparently showed African Jehovah's Witnesses running for their lives during persecution. But he tells the audience they should all rewatch it to see how we would respond to direction from the governing body that seems extreme and even deadly. And asks why it's important to rewatch this drama. He then answers with this, quote, "Will we also receive clear direction on what to do and what not to do during the Great Tribulation? What form will that direction take? Will it make sense to us? If we have complete confidence in Jehovah and his Son," notice they didn't say governing body, but they're synonymous, quote, "we'll be ready to follow the direction of those taking the lead," end quote. It's all assumptive. There's been no proof laid out, zero connecting of the dots between Jehovah and the governing body, just old stories about Joshua and seas and pillars and stuff. But you are to obey or die. This is terrifying stuff, folks. It's sickening. For the second time in this talk, he just conflated and compared the 11 men in New York to God himself and his Son Jesus without providing a single shred of evidence that these men are all connected to them. It continues to be a trust me, bro situation. And the impressionable minds of Jehovah's Witnesses just nod along, even as a few of the thinking minds watching this become increasingly uneasy. He has not provided a single shred of anything that the governing body, those leading Jehovah's Witnesses, are in any way connected to the invisible sky daddy. He just tells some neat stories from an ancient book and points at their own propaganda and demands obedience. This is a cult. And before I get into his third point in this talk, I want to say this immediately. This is nothing more than my opinion as someone that was raised a Jehovah's Witness, as a former 11-year elder and all that stuff, okay? But my opinion is this. Something big is coming. Something really big is coming. I've seen this before. They are about to drop a bomb on Jehovah's Witnesses. I already sensed it when they gave them beers, they gave the ladies pants, you could clink glasses, you can go to college now, you can use your own blood and a whole bunch of other things. This is all pointing to something much, much bigger is coming. And they're greasing the skids for the fallout. Cults use mental reinforcement to maintain control, and the reminders in this broadcast are not an accident. It's not a coincidence. Folks, they're about to drop something big, and I mean really, really big for Jehovah's Witnesses. I'll go even so far as to say it will divide Jehovah's Witnesses. There will be some that will leave, and there will be some that will stay. That's my prediction. something's coming. You might even wonder what I think that something is, and my brain takes me to one place: 1914. In the 1990s, as the Watchtower study conductor, the change on generations was a bomb for thinking witnesses. I saw it in real time from the podium. I was conducting the lesson. I saw it in people's faces. I saw it in post-meeting conversations. And I saw it in people that had noticeably disappeared from the Kingdom Hall after that. The governing body is about to drop another bomb. And I personally think it has something to do with 1914. I would have said blood, but they've already done that. 1914. This talk in July and the morning worship talk in June are not coincidences. These men are calculated. They are mentally preparing Jehovah's Witnesses. Bank it. It's going to be a change to 1914, somehow, some way. On to his third point. His third point in this talk is how Jehovah's Witnesses can keep up. And it's here that I truly know something big is coming. He says, quote, "Be careful not to let disappointments, persecution, or problems cause us to stop or slow in following the direction of those taking the lead." End quote. This entire talk is so damn chilling. And maybe it's my age, my own experience as a witness or something. I was way too young at the time to understand the significance of 1975 and what was going on, but I was there. But the way they are ramping up feels like the same type of dramatic shift to ensure the survival of their organization. The grand disclaimer that those Jehovah is using to take the lead: get things wrong. How many times have we heard this now? They don't even have to apologize for it. They do get things wrong, but you should obey them anyway. Even when they've only ever gotten everything wrong in the history of their organization, they've gotten people killed. Obey them anyway. But still, we're expected to believe that Jehovah is behind it all, even when they get it wrong. He continues with this, quote, "For example, we may respond immediately if we hear something directly from the governing body. But what do we do if we receive direction from our local elders or the circuit overseer? We know their personalities and see their imperfections. Does that cause us to stop or slow down? Can we still see Jehovah behind the direction?" End quote. Newsflash, Brother Luccioni. There has never been a moment where any of us can see Jehovah behind any of their direction. Do you think that the precious person who was physically abused by one of these same elders sees Jehovah behind it all? There is nothing, absolutely nothing, that correlates a bunch of dudes in my local congregation with the same God that listened to Joshua and made the sun stand still. You can keep giving these talks, but the human brain knows something is wrong. Something's wrong. But it doesn't stop this guy, because he continues by saying, quote, "We need to stay close to Jehovah's organization." Why is that important? Well, have you ever followed someone in your car and encountered traffic and suddenly noticed the person you're following is far ahead of you? Next thing you know, they got off on an exit and you missed it. End quote. All of this to make the point that Jehovah's Witnesses need to keep up and obey the organization. He goes on to push the routine, the meetings, the prayers, the preaching, same old formula, same old stuff. He goes on to say that people have disagreed with decisions, become disgruntled, and even slowed down. He says that sadly, just like Israel, things won't be managed perfectly today because there are imperfect men taking the lead, even as he spent this entire talk telling us that Jehovah and Jesus are behind it all. So by inference, that means when imperfect men get it wrong, that it's Jehovah and Jesus that got it wrong. What? What? And they don't just get it wrong in an instant, folks. They let it be taught incorrectly to innocent people in your territory and to children and to anyone that will listen, oftentimes for decades, knowing that the governing body is teaching something wrong. Did Joshua get it wrong when he made the sun stand still? Brother Luccioni says something so intellectually insulting, I'm just speechless, when he next says, quote, "So we have imperfect humans trying their best to follow the direction of their perfect leader," end quote. Listen, Robbie, that makes no sense at all. Why? Because last I checked, whether it was Israel or Joshua, they were all imperfect men too. But they, in the Bible, seem to get it right every single time. And if the same God is the leader, do you care to explain to us why he uses imperfect men to be his voice of direction, and he risks imperfect men screwing up the message with all of their lives on the line? Can you help us understand, Rob? This is just absurd. And in that profoundly dishonest and ridiculous comment, you now have the entire premise of Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah God sucks so bad at saving his people's lives that he allows 11 imperfect men in upstate New York to screw it up at times, even though the Bible doesn't contain a single instance of this ever happening with imperfect men in the past. The sun stood still, the Red Sea parted. Jehovah God went from pillars of fire and stuff, easy to see and to follow, to total ambiguity with a bunch of stupid men that almost always get it wrong. Why? Why did Jehovah do this? Think, people. Think. He goes on to quote in this talk what he calls a, quote, astute circuit overseer. You notice how when they're proving things, they point at their own literature and their own people? That's fascinating. An astute circuit overseer. Who? We don't know. He never tells us. Why we should care, though, is because of this. This astute CO says, quote, "This is the best imperfect organization on earth." Well said. End quote. Complete and utter insanity. The blind trust of men. It's a cult. He continues by saying this, quote, "Never forget what you have. Where else will you go for the guidance, spiritual food, and comfort that Jehovah provides through his organization," end quote. And then in a split second that seriously made me ill, I literally got ill to my stomach, This guy looks into the camera and says this, quote, "There is nowhere else to go," end quote. And I'm not kidding, I felt queasy. The level of mental sickness it takes to enforce control over other innocent human beings. The motive it takes to claim you alone represent an invisible God without even furnishing a shred of proof. And finally, the fear they try to create in people, just like my guy Noah, to get people believing they have to be in this organization or die. Just like my guy telling people to hunker down with the gorillas, don't mind all the pee and poop on his floating box, where they can listen to everyone else drowning outside like Noah did, is just chilling. And this stuff gives people nightmares. Remember, kids hear this. But even adult ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who report physical fear in their bodies and nervous systems decades after leaving, because again, there's nowhere else to go, right? That's the whole message of this talk. Obey them or die. That's it. He concludes this hideous talk with this, quote, "Don't let the things you do not understand blind you to what you have and what you are a part of." So what's the point of this discussion? All indications are that we are deep into the last days and on the verge of entering a future we've long awaited. Like Israel standing at Jordan's banks, obedience and following the direction may mean our lives. Now is the time to be fully convinced of how Jehovah directs his organization. Don't let disappointments or imperfections of others slow you down. Remind yourself of the privilege it is to be part of this imperfect, yes, but unified worldwide organization. And be assured that no matter what dark days lie ahead of us, if you stick close to Jehovah's organization and follow its direction, you will always know the way to go. End quote. For those of us who've been around long enough, this really isn't anything that new. But watching it, you sense a new tone. And if you are a Jehovah's Witness bravely listening to all of this, I implore you to look at all of it closer. There is no proof, none, that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, incidentally, these guys only became the faithful and discreet slave in 2012. Why did Jehovah wait that long to identify the governing body as the faithful slave? He waited till 2012? There is zero proof that they represent anything but their own interests. They're a cult. If they were truly being led by Jesus Christ of the Gospels, the only thing we all should be hearing is Jesus' own voice. And if you got your Bible, you remember how Jesus drew people to his leadership. At Matthew 11, 28 and 29, he says, quote, "Come to me, all you who are toiling and loaded down, and I will refresh you. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm mild-tempered and lowly in heart, and you will find refreshment for yourselves. For my yoke is kindly and my load is light." End quote. That's it. No fireworks, no broadcast, just an invite. True leadership draws people. The governing body in this broadcast are clearly engaging in mind control. Folks, brace yourselves, please. Something big is coming. They're preparing Jehovah's Witnesses. Be hopeful, though. Be hopeful. Hopefully, this next round of new light from these guys is the one that wakes up somebody you love. That despite all these paranoid talks about obeying them no matter what, that someone you love is jolted to their senses by this. Demanding obedience works for some people, but make no mistake, it doesn't work for others. According to Open University Online, their research project, How to Get Someone Out of a Cult, people usually wake up from a cult when a gap opens between the group's idealized reality and the harsh truth. This critical shift is often triggered by a major cognitive dissonance, such as a broken prophecy, or even a leader crossing a moral boundary, Tony Morris at the liquor store, or exposure to unfiltered outside information. However, if you're a Jehovah's Witness or someone pondering all this, if it makes you more comfortable, just lean into your own guy, Jesus himself, okay? In the April 2023 morning worship program, the governing body actually likened themselves to the voice of Jesus. In the talk by Kenneth Flodine, Jesus' Yoke is Kindly, at the 3-minute 28-second mark, this guy says, quote, the governing body could be likened to the voice of Jesus, the head of the congregation. So when we willingly submit to the faithful slave, we're ultimately submitting to Jesus' authority and direction. End quote. The governing body is as powerful as Jesus? Now open up your Bible, that book you trust, and read what Jesus said. At Luke 21:8, Jesus said, quote, watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming, I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them. End quote. I'm bookmarking the July 2026 JW broadcast and this talk by Robert Luccioni. Something big is coming. Bank it. Thanks for joining me this week. Wherever you may be, question everything.